Hello, my name is Mike Fletcher. Welcome to this session entitled The Role of the Specialist and the Part They Play in This Brave New World. As Mediatel's columnist Dominic Mills pointed out this week, pre-pandemic, outdoor advertising ad spend was growing at around 7.6% and double that for digital out-of-home. Historic studies into its influence on consumers have demonstrated that almost half of shoppers see out-of-home during the 30-minute window just prior to a purchase. While during the coronavirus crisis, brands have used out-of-home to deliver timely, considered and supportive public service messaging. The talent that lies behind the out-of-home curtain is made up of specialist agencies, distinctly separate to the in-house media agency teams that work on TV, radio, publishing and other media disciplines. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by three of these specialist firms, Talon Outdoor, Posterscope and Kinetic, who have kindly agreed to tell us more about what they do and how the sector is evolving for a post-COVID world. From Talon Outdoor, we have Sophie Pemberton, Group Strategy Director. From Posterscope, we're joined by Gill, Chief Client Officer. And from Kinetic, please welcome Nicole Lonsdale. Nicole, let's start with you. You've worked within a major media agency as head of outdoor, so maybe you can give us the rationale from an agency point of view for outsourcing out of home to the specialists. What was the thinking?
Hi, Mike. I suppose firstly it's worth pointing out that the majority of my career was actually specialist size. I'm probably a little bit biased with this, but you're right that 7 years was spent within Mindshare, and this was heading up the out-of-home team there. So specifically heading up the planning solutions, and I suppose raising the profile of out-of-home to the clients within Mindshare. What we've done though, actually, following this at Kinetic, is sort of follow this model, because at the time the trading was outsourced to the specialist, and actually we feel this model works incredibly well because you get the best of both worlds, if you like. So we base all of our larger planning teams within our agencies, the Kinetic employees, and what this offers them is that they're closer to clients, they can deliver more integrated solutions with other media, but they have access to the full resource back at Kinetic HQ. So they have access to our data and insight teams and also the creative solutions teams too. And I suppose from my perspective, why there are out-of-home specialists is because audience behaviour outside of the home is a specialism. When someone's outside of their home, they're performing a range of different tasks and activities, and we try and segment this quite neatly into commuting, shopping and socialising. And this, because this tends to be where you find different forms of advertising or out-of-home advertising. And it's worth pointing out within each of these areas, and when people are performing each of these activities, they often have different mindsets that vary depending upon the location they're in, but also the time of day that they're there. And if you then overlay the fact that audiences outside of the home are now highly connected, it means that out of home often drives a lot of online behaviour. And this means, from my point of view, I suppose, is that when a brand wants to engage with audiences outside of the home, they need this level of expertise and this level of specialism. And a specialist has this and it understands this behaviour, so is best suited to deliver a planning solution that fits the objectives of the brief.
Gill, is this something that that you recognise as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about being a location-based marketing specialist because, to what Nicole's saying, is we've got a really deep understanding of what people think, feel and do when they're out of home. So that makes all of us experts in reaching and influencing audiences in the physical world. And how we do that is we combine insight, data, technology and capabilities. And it's really important to think here, we want to create creative, compelling, quantifiable solutions for our brands to make a real difference to their brands and business. And that has been true since specialists have been around, so 20 plus years. But probably what we're doing now is slightly has evolved because we have much more access to data. what we don't deliver is it's not a one size fits all. And I find that, funny enough, I find outsourcing quite an old fashioned term, because you wouldn't talk about that if it was a sort of hot new digital startup like a Brain Labs. What it is about using the specialisms. And we've talked about how we do this in different capacities. We work with different clients in different ways. And again, some clients actually think the out of home medium is so important they want to have a direct relationship with those specialists. Obviously, I can't go into which ones those are, but I think being a specialist, you tend to be able to extract more value, which we can do, and we invest millions, and you'll hear from all of us in terms of our tools and systems, I'm sure, into developing that understanding, into the tools and systems that allow us to understand and plan more effective out of home solutions. So that's kind of where it's come from.
And do you, as Nicole said about Kinetic, do you in-house people into agencies as well?
As I said, it's not a one size fits all. So we work with different agencies and different clients in different ways. In-housing is a really interesting term. So yes, absolutely, there will be different solutions for different clients. And that's the whole point of the solution. It very much isn't an outsourcing, let it go. What we do is we're involved with those planning teams and understanding what the brands are trying to do. And as I said, with some clients, it's a direct relationship outside of their relationship with the media agency.
Yeah. So it's quite a complex format with different solutions. Sophie, from a complexity point of view or from a strategic point of view, are there any other elements that you guys have to manage?
Yeah, I guess I'd build on both of those points, and Nicole's in particular, in that there are a range of tasks that people undertake when they're out of home. And my point of view as a specialist is I would much rather have someone who really is an expert in their field doing what they need to do than a generalist. And we exist because we are experts. And I also worked in agencies for 7 or 8 years. I was a comms planner. I was a jack of all trades. And you start to realise how complex and how fragmented this is all getting. And actually to have a specialist, I think, is immensely valuable. And I was on a panel last year and someone called specialist outdated. I had an argument with him. And I just think that's I just think that's a really narrow-minded view, because actually what we're bringing to the table is a huge amount of value. And you know that digital agencies are specialists and they don't come under the same sort of scrutiny. So I think that kind of role for us is really important. And strategically, I guess out of home remains, in my point of view, one of the most complicated media channels. It has a huge diversity in formats and environments. Audience mindsets, movements are changing all the time. It can drive fame or it can drive action. It's actually really complicated. And there's more data and tech and audiences and inventory than ever before. So strategically, it's really important for Talon, and I'm assuming the same for Kinetic and Posterscope, that we keep ahead of the market, but we maintain this element of quality control and a bit of cynicism, I'm not going to lie, because we don't want to be caught up in the emperor's new clothes, which is happening a lot in media. Everyone wants to do a media first, but actually we maintain that level of, you know, is that real? Is that actually effective? And can we do something that's a bit better that doesn't just generate column inches? So that's where we operate. And strategically, we need to figure out how we drive that innovation, how we understand that out of home works alongside all the other media channels that now exist, particularly digital channels as we digitize our inventory more and more. And also operate a test and learn strategy. So there's got to be a constant evolution of planning and buying capabilities and learning and testing and growing. And I think all of that is what specialists are made for. It's what we're built for, and it's what we're experts in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and as you say, it's like you have to be across the board and know everything about everything ranging from consumer behaviour through to the technology. An interesting point about how it's dovetailing into digital, and I guess, in terms of the technological future, that brings us nicely into the whole concept of programmatic and how that is impacting on out of home. Nicole, what are clients interested in knowing about the programmatic future of out of home? Are they asking lots of technical questions? Do you feel that they know what's happening with programmatic at the moment?
They are asking lots of questions, and I suppose the level of knowledge varies depending upon who's asking it. I think firstly it's important to point out that programmatic digital out of home is still very much in its infancy. But we do feel at Kinetic that post-COVID, because of what it offers, this could accelerate at a much quicker rate. I think particularly for the second half of this year and into 2021. So we ran around 20 programmatic campaigns last year in 2019, and we feel we'll do more this year and next year. For us, we see programmatic digital out of home as another route to market. It's not going to overtake anything that happens now in terms of, I suppose, more traditional routes or going after mass audiences. It's about a blended approach, very much in the same way as it is with sort of TV buying, where you've got TV buying with more mass audiences, and then you've got addressable TV as well. I suppose when we're educating clients on the benefits of programmatic digital out of home, we say that there are three core benefits, if you like. The first is more efficient audience targeting, and we estimate this is sort of anywhere up to 30% efficiencies. And the reason it does this is that you're looking at tracking audiences on a frame by frame, hour by hour basis, which makes it more efficient. I suppose the second benefit is it allows digital out of home to be part of the wider digital ecosystem. So to sit alongside things like DAX, things like addressable TV, things like programmatic display as well. And I suppose perhaps the most important reason coming out of COVID is, I suppose, what it offers in terms of agile deployment. There's no fixed 14-day periods. You can dial up or dial down impact delivery. You could also switch off a campaign or potentially move impacts from one city to another. And if we consider what's happened in Leicester with a local lockdown, and potentially there's going to be another local lockdown in Blackburn in the coming days, this is quite attractive to an advertiser. But I suppose what it's worth clients being aware of as well is that not all digital out of home inventory can be surfaced programmatically, either via a DSP or any other route. And actually there's some really core differences between programmatic digital out of home and other forms of programmatic. It's not one-to-one, it's about much more granular audience targeting that's activated in near real time. And there's also not an infinite supply of opportunities either. So there's some positives with programmatic, but also there's some, I suppose, watch outs as well.
Excellent. Why isn't there an infinite supply? Like, is it just because it's such a new area at the moment?
It's just because out of home frames are fixed. There's only a certain number of them that exist, whether that's digital or with digital faces. So that's why it's very, very different to other forms of media out there where there is an infinite supply.
Okay, cool. And obviously one of the advantages of a programmatic future for out of home is the amount of data that it produces. Sophie, is this something that clients are asking more and more for? Is the amount of granular data on audience behaviours?
Yeah, I work. Group strategy director encompasses technology, data, programmatic now, insight and measurement. So I've been doing a significant amount of work in the programmatic and tech and data space. And just before I move on to the data point, I think programmatic out of home in particular is a really interesting area and a really valuable one for us to move into for growth opportunities. But I'm really not happy that we've adopted a word from another landscape and we're trying to retrofit that into what we're trying to do. I think it's really distracting. I think people know what programmatic is and then try and look through this new out-of-home trading and planning and buying mechanic through that lens. And it's just, to me, it doesn't work. And I'm not suggesting that myself, I can come up with a new word because I've tried and it's really hard. But I just think it's really difficult for us to think about how that works. So we take a very consultative approach about that and make sure that we're doing things for the right reasons, like Nicole mentioned. Let's talk about the positives, but also talk about the watch. So data provides a huge amount of support for programmatic infrastructure. And data has come about in the last couple of years in out of home with pretty great abundance, actually. And I love data. I'm a bit of a geek. It's finally fashionable. Location data in out of home in particular is really exciting. It's not necessarily a new concept. It's been around for a while, but it's becoming more widely adopted and more widely understood. But from my point of view, we need to make sure that we're using the right data and not just any data, because it's not created equal. And as part of massive RFIs into this process, as part of understanding this landscape, I can tell you that there's a huge amount of really crap data out there that is being used for planning and buying purposes. And, you know, from my point of view, I would just, again, this is probably my cynicism coming into play as a specialist, but just make sure that you understand the huge variety that is available. And this goes for any media channel, not just out of home. Make sure that you're applying the right data science, channel expertise to make it suitable for the channel that you're planning with. You know, out of home, for example, is a really complicated in particular, because I've seen quite a lot of data say, well, if you're in 200 meters proximity of a panel, that means you saw it. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm sat here in my house right now in Hackney, and I'm looking at a 6-sheet 200 meters down the road. And I probably won't be for the rest of the day. So, you know, that kind of thought process is really important. But we do know that when we apply the right data to out of home, you know, benchmarks can exceed themselves really quite significantly. And we've done a lot of work to understand that. And when we employ our DMP called ADA, you know, benchmarks and norms are surpassed by just over 50% for consideration, and purchase intent goes up. And I know that Posterscope and Kinetic both have similar solutions in market, and I'm sure they've seen the same kind of metrics increase. So the value of it is there, and there's a huge amount of data, but we just need to make sure that we are using the right data, and we're, you know, analyzing it correctly, and we're interrogating it. And I guess there's loads of opportunities that come with it, you know, omnichannel audience targeting, transparency, sophisticated attribution. It's brilliant, but I think we just need to make sure that we're always doing the right thing with it, and we're using it in the right way.
Yeah, I agree with what Sophie was saying, actually, because that's another reason, I suppose, why a specialist exists. We're investing in all of this, in all of these data sets. Obviously, Sophie mentioned ADA. We have a platform called Journeys. We also invest in qualitative panels as well. So it's looking at combining, I suppose, audience tracking data with audience behavioural insights as well. And as I said before, it's very complex understanding audiences' movement outside of home, but also consumers' behaviour and expected behaviour, which I think will really come into its own as we're trying to sort of work out whether there will be a new normal following COVID as well. There's a lot of unknowns out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Gill, did you want to chip in there?
Yeah, I think both points. I know we started programmatic. I totally agree with Nicole. It's another route to market. It's not an either or, and one should definitely not replace the other. And in terms of the data and technology, again, Sophie said, there's reams and reams of data. We all have mobile phones. We know how much we're releasing. How we look at it is there is no one single point of truth for data. There is no silver bullet that's going to tell you everything about an audience, and that's why we've all invested in, and it's millions invested into systems that allow us to understand what people are thinking, feeling and doing in a particular location, where they are, where they've been, where they might go. And that's what the sort of level of complexity we work with, because different data will inform different decisions. For some advertisers, there might be a really clear correlation for that affects their business. So you take someone like Pyrenees, hay fever relief. When pollen counts are high, more people buy hay fever relief. So we did the first, you know, sort of programmatic buy around that. But for other clients, it's not quite as clear. So we need to take all the data, understand that, and use it to influence it. So all of the mapping tools that we invest in are vital here, and they're not only vital for that; they're vital for brand safety. So HFSS, I think it added quite a lot of S's then, targeting schools, alcohol. We need to ensure that when our brands are in out of home, they are performing in a brand safe way, and that's hugely important to them and to us. So we spend that time using reams of data to pull in to make sure that we understand that audience really well before we even get to pulling together an out of home plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, so within media agencies, like the the reporting and the metrics and the data, it's something that they understand internally. But from your guys' point of view, I presume you have to go in and present the data. Do you? You have to present the findings, because the complexities within that are a lot more.
Yeah, I think we always do. I mean, and what I find really works, and I'm sure you guys do the same, is mapping, and showing things on a map makes everything clearer. Heat maps, and actually, we find clients use mapping to understand and uncover the hidden insight in that location, aside from when they're planning or buying an out-of-home campaign. So actually demonstrating that data on there really helps clients see what's going on and brands understand what's going on for their audience in a particular moment or a particular environment. Yeah,
absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it, that everything we thought we knew about the consumer before COVID has actually probably now changed, like in today's new normal. I hate that phrase, but it's that has to be said. But yeah.
Although out of home doesn't change, out of home goes where people go. So if people aren't coming into town, as you said, we're far more local at the moment. So that's where we'll be talking to people.
Yeah, but even with the technological and data evolution, content will always be the main priority for out of home. Right? I mean, so what role does the specialist play in ensuring content fits the out of home environments? Gill, do you want to continue with that point?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the first job of advertising is to get noticed, any advertising. And that content or creative is incredibly important to that. And in traditional world, that creative is about distilling your idea into a really powerful image and a pithy narrative. That's always been the case for out of home. I think our role is, and the central creative idea is still really important. Where I think our role has evolved is being able to demonstrate the capabilities of the medium, the technology, the techniques. All they do is add to the palette available to those creative teams. It's not about us jockeying for position in the creative world, because the central creative idea still has to be there. But what we do know now is with areas like dynamic, which I know you talked about earlier today, what we're doing is giving advertisers an increased depth of usage for out of home. And we have a sort of compelling body of evidence between us and different research that demonstrates that if you can make that message more relevant to people, it's more likely to get noticed, which is kind of the first job of the advertising. So creative is still fundamental. What we're doing is broadening the palette for advertisers in terms of the tools and techniques they might use, but it still has to be constrained by the central creative idea, which is not something we would necessarily be creating.
Yeah, Sophie, is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I think that from our point of view, we've seen that creative execution can have up to 60 to 70% of an impact on econometric modelling results. That is huge. You can do as much planning, sophisticated data usage, buying capabilities as you like. And if the creative is terrible, you're not going to have a good campaign. So, sometimes we do need to go back to basics. And whilst all of this really sexy, exciting stuff is happening, it's fundamental that you get the campaign strategy, the creative execution right. And I think that's going to be just as important, well, even more important actually after this whole COVID situation settles down, because there's going to be hopefully, I think that there will be, there's going to be a massive influx of people wanting to return to out of home. I'm desperate. I'm sure, 95% of the UK population are. And all of these audiences and out of home are going to provide loads of opportunity. And we're already seeing that happen. Roadside traffic levels are already back to normal. People and clients are investing in those environments, but that does mean that there's going to be a lot of brands out there, and making sure that you fundamentally get your creative right is just going to make your campaign as effective as possible in the first instance. Do you know what? If you're new to out of home and you're thinking about using it in the next 6 months, start with the basics, start with your creative, and then layer on all of this really sexy, exciting stuff afterwards, because if you don't get that right, it can really hinder the campaign effectiveness.
Yeah, I think I'd add to Sophie's point there as well. We incorporate a lot of behavioural science thinking into the way that we plan and how we advise clients to use the creative messaging. And I think out of home has a role to play in almost shaping and normalising behaviour as we come out of COVID. So there's a social, so there's a behavioural science nudge called social proof. And actually that's quite invaluable when it comes down to sort of normalising behaviour, I suppose. Even things like on messaging or on poster messaging, displaying different opening times for shops or quieter times to reassure people or to instill confidence in the public, or even things like hygiene standards or social distancing. So there is a role that the creative can play in helping brands almost like shape this this new normal, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, excellent. Okay, so the next 12 months, like how's it going to be looking for out of home? I mentioned at the very beginning in my intro that obviously ad spend was growing, and we all see a recovery in that ad spend for out of home, do we? Who wants to comment?
Yeah, I think we all see that starting to come back, and you know, I think that we as a channel and as specialists are going to see two really extreme ends of the spectrum. People have been told to stay indoors, and that is going to fundamentally impact our out-of-home channel as we know it. But the other end of that spectrum now is this really quick swing back into, oh my God, everyone's outside again. Can we get a campaign live? And those two extreme ends we're moving into the last of that, but it provides a really interesting point of view for us. And I guess the next 12 months, as I see it, is going to be really important for clients to get their campaign strategies right and make sure that they're based on things that are actually happening. And this is where I think data becomes really interesting. And back to my point before, every single week we're seeing people do things differently, and you have to make sure that you're using data that is for planning, especially, that is relevant to what people are doing right now. There's no point in using data from last year. There's no point in using data from 3 months ago. You have to be using that data to inform planning, because people's movements and journeys and behaviors have changed and will continue to change quite dramatically in the next 12 months. So to create those really important and effective targeting strategies, we need to use data, make sure we're leveraging it in the right way, and fundamentally make sure that we are learning from it. So make sure that you have a robust measurement strategy in place, test campaign strategies and different ways of working, and see what happens afterwards, because you've got to learn from these things to figure out how you move forwards and evolve your planning and buying capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Gill, do you have anything to add to that? I presume that we all think that out of home will have an important role to play in kickstarting the economy again.
I think from a practical point of view, we've all demonstrated that audiences are back. Now, they may not be back in the same way, they're distributed differently, but if you take, for instance, this week where everyone's sort of trying to go off on holiday, looking forward to another 8 weeks, looking after their children. So people are out and about, but arguably, as everyone said, there is going to be no return to normal. Flexibility, reacting to behaviour and ability to do that in real time is going to be hugely important. And alongside that, we've seen all the great out-of-home work that actually went on during lockdown, that finding an appropriate tone is going to be vital. And as Sophie said, it's not about what happened 3 months ago, a year ago. It's about matching that tone to make sure that we and brands are reacting to things that are front of mind for people. What can the brand do and make sure, and how's that coloured by the circumstances we're in? So that is going to be hugely important, as well as building brands and brands, and brand safety. So I think the 12 months will be interesting. I think agility and flexibility are going to be keywords for us to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicole, so that's probably covered the next 12 months, but do you see a longer term future after that? So what about out of home for the next couple of years?
I mean, I agree with everything that Gill and Sophie have said, but if I think back to what you said at the beginning and about the Dominic Mills article, I very much agree with what he said in there. I think if we think back pre-COVID, out of home was almost at an inflection point. There'd been huge investment in the channel in terms of the digitisation of frames, in terms of the tech that we've all spoken about and the data that we've all spoken about. So actually, with audiences returning, probably out of home offers more than it's ever done, because nothing's changed in terms of that investment. So I think its capabilities are really broad now, particularly as we're likely to go into sort of a global recession as well, in the fact that it can build brands, it can convey trust, it does this in a very public, brand safe way, but also with digital out of home, you've got the flexibility and agility of activation as well. What I said before about sort of dialing up and dialing down impacts, moving impacts, if there is something like a local lockdown, for example. And I think it's important to remember as well that digital out of home, I suppose, is the connector. It's the public screen that connects with the private screen. So in terms of priming online behaviour, driving things like m-commerce. So if you think about it, there's such a broad spectrum of things that out of home can offer now that audiences are returning. Obviously, completely appreciate that brands have to factor in the tone, particularly in their creative as well. But I think it's got more to offer in uncertain times than ever before, and I think it should be very integral to an advertiser's comms plan moving forward.
Fantastic, that's superb. Thank you so much, everybody. Gill, Nicole, Sophie, very much appreciate your input into this, and thank you to our audience for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.